Okay, picture this. It's 2003, and professional cycling in Great Britain has just endured almost a century of absolute mediocrity. I mean, since 1908, British riders had won exactly one gold medal at the Olympics. And in 110 years, not a single British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. In fact, their reputation was so unbelievably bad that a top bike manufacturer in Europe actually refused to sell gear to the team. They were literally terrified that seeing the Brits on their bikes would tank their sales. No way, right? Well, enter Dave Brailsford. He's the newly hired performance director, and he was about to trigger a completely unprecedented era of absolute dominance. Let's dive into exactly how he did it in today's explainer. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the power of tiny gains, cross the plateau of latent potential, look at why we need to focus on systems instead of goals, peel back the layers of behavior change, and finally get into building identity-based habits. We're pulling from James Clear's phenomenal book, Atomic Habits. Clear totally dissects Dave Brailsford's relentless, kind of counterintuitive strategy for British cycling. Brailsford called this the aggregation of marginal gains. Now, this wasn't about finding one massive, game-changing improvement, not at all. Instead, the entire philosophy was built around searching for just a tiny 1% margin of improvement in literally everything you do. What's absolutely fascinating is just how incredibly specific and seemingly insignificant these tweaks really were. Brailsford and his team went in and redesigned the bike seats. They rubbed alcohol on the tires just to get a slightly better grip. They had riders wear electrically heated overshorts to keep muscle temperatures perfectly ideal. They even went as far as hiring a surgeon to teach the team the absolute best hand-washing techniques so they wouldn't catch colds. Oh, and they painted the inside of the team truck white. Why? So they could spot tiny specks of dust that might degrade their finely tuned bikes. And the result of all this? At the 2008 Olympics, they took home an astounding 60% of the available gold medals. And this right here perfectly illustrates why that aggregation works so well. The math behind it is just striking. If you manage to get just 1% better each day for a whole year, you don't just get 365% better. Because of how compounding works, you end up nearly 38 times better by the end of the year. But, on the flip side, if you get 1% worse each day, you essentially decline all the way down to zero. What starts out as this minor, almost invisible choice compounds into a massive transformation. Habits are basically the compound interest of self-improvement. Making a choice that's 1% better or 1% worse feels completely insignificant in the moment. It's exactly like shifting the flight path of an airplane by just 3.5 degrees. Say you're flying from LA to New York, and the pilot adjusts the heading 3.5 degrees south. The nose of the plane moves, maybe a few feet at takeoff? You wouldn't even feel it. But magnify that across the entire United States, and suddenly you're landing in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. But here is exactly where we all get stuck. And if you have ever failed at building a habit, this is going to validate your experience so much. Imagine an ice cube sitting in a cold room. It's 25 degrees. The room slowly heats up. 26, 27, 30, 31 degrees. And the ice cube, it just sits there. Literally nothing happens. Then it hits 32 degrees. The ice begins to melt. That single 1-degree shift, which honestly seemed no different from any of the temperature increases before it, just unlocked a massive change. Your hard work in those earlier degrees wasn't wasted at all. It was just being stored up for that breakthrough. We actually call this the plateau of latent potential. Human nature makes us expect progress to be this perfect straight line, but in reality, the most powerful outcomes are always delayed. And that delay creates this huge gap between what you think should happen and what actually happens. We call that gap the valley of disappointment. This is exactly where people quit their good habits, right? Because they don't see those immediate tangible results. They think, well, my running or my studying isn't working, when actually they just haven't crossed that critical temperature threshold yet. So the really crucial point here is that mastery requires immense patience. Take the San Antonio Spurs, one of the most successful franchises in NBA history. They literally hang this quote from social reformer Jacob Riis right in their locker room. They look at the idea of a stonecutter hammering 100 times without even a tiny crack showing, fully knowing that it's the 101st blow that splits the rock. It's never just that last blow. It's the stored energy of absolutely everything that happened before it. Okay, let's pivot for a second, because we need to completely dismantle some prevailing wisdom here. From day one, we are all taught to set goals. But if you truly want to change your habits, you kind of need to forget about goals. Focus on your systems instead. Like Scott Adams points out, goals are just about the results you want to achieve. Systems, on the other hand, are the actual processes that lead to those results. Think of it like this. If you're a coach, your goal is winning the championship. But your system? That's how you recruit players, how you manage your assistant coaches, and how you run practice every single day. Now, why are goals actually so problematic? Well, there are 4 major flaws. First is survivorship bias. Every Olympian has the exact same goal, to win gold. So if winners and losers share the identical goal, the goal obviously isn't the thing differentiating them. Second, it's totally momentary. You clean a messy room to achieve a goal, you're really just treating a symptom. Your underlying sloppy habits will just make it a disaster again next week. Third, goals completely restrict your happiness. You're constantly pushing off being happy until you hit that next arbitrary milestone. And fourth is the yo-yo effect. How many runners stop running the exact day they cross the marathon finish line? Lots of them, because the goal is just gone. The motivation vanishes. And that brings us to what is easily one of the most profound takeaways of this entire explainer. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. I absolutely love that. If you want to improve for good, you literally must solve your problems at the systems level, not the results level. If you fix the inputs, the outputs are going to fix themselves. An atomic habit isn't some massive overhaul, it's a tiny routine that serves as one component of a much, much larger system of compound growth. To see how this really plays out in human psychology, think of behavior change like the layers of an onion. That very outer layer, that's changing your outcomes, your goals, like wanting to lose weight. The middle layer is changing your processes. Those are your systems, like setting up a new gym routine. But that innermost, absolute deepest layer, that is changing your identity. Your identity is everything. It's your worldview, your self-image, the absolute deepest assumptions you hold to be true. Most people, they try to change from the outside in. They start by focusing on what they want to achieve. But the single best way to build habits that actually last is to flip that and start from the inside out. We need to build identity-based habits, focusing first and foremost on exactly who we wish to become. Just consider this simple comparison. It perfectly shows how a tiny shift in your vocabulary signals a massive shift in underlying belief. Picture 2 people trying to resist a cigarette. The first one says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." Now that is an outcome-based habit. Deep down, they still believe they are a smoker who's just trying to be something else. But the second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." Boom, that is an identity-based habit. Smoking is a part of their past life, not who they are today. To really ground this, there's this brilliant real-world story in the book about an entrepreneur named Brian Clark. Brian had chewed his nails his entire life. It was a terrible, nervous habit. And through sheer, exhausting willpower, he finally managed to stop just long enough for his nails to grow out. But then, he did something super clever. He asked his wife to schedule his first ever manicure. And suddenly, he's looking down at his hands, and he's feeling genuinely proud of them. Guess what? He never chewed his nails ever again. Why? Because his self-image completely shifted. He now identified as a guy who took care of his nails. It all boils down to this one core truth. Behavior that is incongruent with the self simply will not last. You might really want more money, sure, but if your internal identity is someone who consumes things rather than creates things, you are always going to be pulled towards spending instead of earning. You can set a brand new goal, you can build a fancy new system, but if you don't change the underlying beliefs that drove your past behavior, your old identity is just going to continuously sabotage your new plans. So, we'll wrap up this explainer with a question you should really ask yourself the very next time you want to make a change in your life. Don't start by asking what you want to achieve. Ask yourself this: who is the type of person that could achieve the outcome I want? Because true behavior change is identity change. It's time to stop just chasing results. So what tiny vote can you cast today for the person you want to become tomorrow?